If you're watching this on the day of upload, today is May 19th, 2019, 20 years to the day when The Phantom Menace released in theaters. I love this film. It is the reason I am the Star Wars fan I am today. It's what sent me down the path of lifelong Star Wars fandom. It's the largest reason why you're watching some dude from Wisconsin ramble on and on and on and on about space wizards and starfighters. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. Its childish tone and crazy pod races is what grabbed a hold of me. But there's always seemed to be an underlying layer of mythology in all of these silly space films. For me, in regards to episode 1, that mythology is embodied within a single character. Not the discovered chosen one, surprisingly, but the person who found him, Qui-Gon. It seems that most of the heavily involved fan community agrees that Qui-Gon is the best, quote, Jedi, unquote. His connection with and mindfulness of the living force, his patience with young Anakin, and his steadfast distrust in the authority of the Council all support that point. Although I'm not too sure about him being the best Jedi ever. I think he's merely the best that the inept, flawed, and necrotic Jedi Order of the prequel trilogy could have ever hoped to produce. Let's start with the new material we've gotten in the past few months. By the way, can we talk about the fact that in the past few months we got like 4 decent bits on Qui-Gon, and like 3 of them are like full-blown stories? Anyways, in Queen's Shadow, we got a quick snippet about how Qui-Gon knew about Padme and Sabe's little switcheroo from the very beginning. Let's talk about Padme's and Qui-Gon's relationship for a second. I believe that talking down to others was kind of Qui-Gon's norm. He puts Obi-Wan in his place throughout the film, even when it's not really deserved, and he marches right into the upper management meeting to tell them, yeah, I found this kid. I don't care what you think, but I'm going to be training him because of some old prophecies I found down in the basement. Qui-Gon's got a history with being abrasive, and Padme was nothing if not abrasive. They're sort of kindred spirits in my mind. She stood for whatever she, quote, knew was right, and never ever faltered from that. I think E.K. Johnston, the author of Queen's Shadow, put it best. Padme and Qui-Gon recognized that the system was broken, but they loved the good parts a little too much. Which brings me to Master and Apprentice. I was expecting this book to be about half Obi-Wan, half Qui-Gon, sharing the spotlight as co-protagonists, kind of like how Rey and Kylo do in the sequel trilogy. In reality, though, it was practically a Qui-Gon novel with Obi-Wan as a supporting character. The level of understanding Claudia Gray took us to was insane. Qui-Gon is ordered to stabilize a situation on a Zerka-backed planet. Keep in mind, Zerka's like this megacorp in the Star Wars universe. Something that proves difficult considering that Zerka openly engages in sentient enslavement. Random aside, Claudia Gray writes that Zerka uses the term, quote, items of sentient property, unquote, to describe their slaves, and I didn't think that there was a written sentence that could make me gag, but by Ashwa, Claudia Gray found one. Ugh, items of sentient property. Blech. Anyways, that's what Qui-Gon was dealing with, and despite his willingness to disregard the council and buck authority, he allowed slavery to be a thing. He does even in episode 1. In Master and Apprentice, he only does something once it was clear that taking action wouldn't affect his primary directive. I don't know about you, but I could never see Luke Skywalker or Rey or Han Solo willing to allow any sort of injustice like that to take place. Qui-Gon may be a rebel, but he still allows himself to be beholden to the Jedi Order's mandates, and by extension, the corrupt bureaucracy of the Republic. Another thing that Claudia gave us is a deeper understanding of Qui-Gon's obsession with prophecy. something inherited from his old master Dooku. In Cavan Scott's Dooku Jedi Lost, we learned that Dooku and his old buddy Sifo Dyas basically snuck into the Jedi Archives version of the Hogwarts restricted section because Young Rebellion. This led to a lifelong fascination for Dooku with anything that the Jedi Council thought was dangerous. Then Sifo Dyas starts to display his affinity for visions of the future. However, the modern Jedi write the old prophecies off as either silly curiosities or outright dangerous relics. Well, that's enough to get Dooku interested, and we see him passing this curiosity down to Qui-Gon in the, quote, before, unquote, chapters of Master and Apprentice. Within the same book, where Qui-Gon seemingly witnesses the beginning of some prophecies coming true. So, what does this mean for the character of Qui-Gon? Well, my interpretation is that he's clearly his master's Padawan. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that Dooku and Qui-Gon are two sides of the same coin. Dooku had the strength to break away from the dogma of the Jedi and their blind loyalty to the corrupt Republic, but not the strength to resist the pull of his own entitlement. While Qui-Gon, the opposite is true. Had Qui-Gon left the Order, I think he could have stayed on the path of the light. I'd even see a little bit of a parallel to Dooku and Qui-Gon's thematic connection and how Kylo and Rey are linked thematically. One dwelling within the dark, the other living in the light. The only thing separating these two pairs of characters is an obsession with the past. Dooku, Qui-Gon, and even Kylo are all obsessed with what happens before. What was foretold? What can the past give us to deal with the future? Yeah, I know about Kylo's whole let the past die thing, says the guy willing to murder family members because of what they did in said past. And, that's why Rey's parents being nobody makes perfect sense. She has the strength to stay within the light while bucking the status quo. She's from the outside of the legacy, just like Palpatine was sort of like this outside infection that rotted the Jedi from within. Rey will be like the cure to burn away his corruption once and for... I'm sorry, this is a Qui-Gon video. Get back on topic. Before we get to the main event, let's talk about Qui-Gon's obsession with the future and the living force. Jody Houser wrote the one-shot comic for Qui-Gon in the Age of Republic series. In this comic, we see the focusing of Qui-Gon's mistrust and authority on the Jedi Council itself and its philosophies. He's shown firsthand that the people of the galaxy, the common people of the galaxy, don't see the Jedi as peacekeepers or mediators, but as great warriors. He even has his own dark side cave experience, which he interprets as a warning that the Jedi are in danger of becoming overtaken by the pull of violence. Keep in mind that Qui-Gon literally took a hyper leap of faith just to get where he had his vision. Qui-Gon is completely devoted to the Force. Once he gets an interpretation in his head, he's not likely to step back from that premise due to his stubbornness. So, as a recap, before we get into the Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon is stubborn, completely devoted to the Force's will, both a good and bad thing, has the predisposition for disregarding authority, and looks to the past for answers to the present problems. Now that the stage is set, let's move on to the actual impetus of this character analysis, the Phantom Menace itself, and Qui-Gon's connection with Anakin. Qui-Gon knows that the Jedi are in grave danger, but instead of looking towards the future, he's waiting for the Force to give him an answer. Then he finds this boy, a boy that can see things before they happen, a boy with a massive midichlorian count. By the way, quick aside, that's another weakness of the modern Jedi, in my opinion, and Qui-Gon plays right into that. Instead of only accepting those willing to train as Jedi, they follow this weird, cold, unfeeling process like blood testing babies. Because there's no way Chirrut wasn't tested, and he would have been a freaking great Jedi. But nope, can't force push, can't join, damage the rules. Anyways, while Qui-Gon does make it clear to Anakin that he doesn't have to come with him, and that the life of a Jedi is a hard one, he refers to Anakin as a virgin to the Council, not as a young boy, not as a person, and his name is Anakin, but almost like a thing, a piece of the Force that made itself known when it was needed. Now, I'm not saying that Qui-Gon thought of Anakin as a tool in a conscious sense, but he does openly tout that he is the chosen one, you must see it. With Anakin in the room, with his hands on Anakin's shoulders. I see a lot of AU theories about how if Qui-Gon would have trained Anakin away from the Jedi Order, Darth Vader might have never risen. Honestly, I think Qui-Gon was very quietly desperate. His dying words to Obi-Wan weren't to keep the boy safe, weren't to take care of Anakin, but to train him. Anakin would have been under immense pressure if Qui-Gon was the one to train him, telling him over and over again that he needed to train to fulfill his role in this weird prophecy that Anakin's never even read. I think Qui-Gon might have messed up Anakin even more than the Jedi and Obi-Wan did. In conclusion, Qui-Gon was a deeply, deeply flawed person. And that's what makes a great character. Qui-Gon was a good Jedi and a good person, but he still loved the old ways just a little bit too much, and that was where he failed. Okay, well, I barely talked about The Phantom Menace. Sorry about that, but the only reason I could have talked about 2 books, an audio drama, and a comic for 14 minutes now is because of episode 1. The only reason I took every opportunity to go to the arcade as a kid is because of episode 1. The only reason Star Wars was alive enough for Disney to buy Lucasfilm is because of episode 1. The only reason the second generation of Star Wars fans is so large and so strong is because of episode 1. For those and so many other reasons, I love The Phantom Menace.